Hi everyone, welcome to my allotment. This video is one I didn't particularly want to make, but I think it's important as hobby gardeners that we talk about it, compare notes, and maybe we can make something happen. If you're new to my channel, remember to subscribe, and if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. So what I wanted to talk about in this video is weed killer contamination in compost or manure. So this could be in compost that you buy bagged, it could be labeled organic, it could also be fresh from the stable yard, from your neighbor's horses. It's something that is brought in with compost or manure into your garden. And the specific weed killer I'm talking about is the Aminopyralid or cultivation, which is a related one. The Aminopyralid one is used by agriculture, is used to spray fields of hay or silage to get rid of poisonous or invasive broadleaf weeds, and it's very effective, but it does not kill the grass. However, it stays in the grass and the animal eats it, and then a certain percentage of that weed killer is still present in their manure. So the manure that comes from animals that have been fed sprayed hay is banned from entering into compost manufacturing, or indeed to be sold off that farm as a compost intended for, or manure intended for growing stuff in. And clopyralid is included in certain weed killers that you can use for your lawn, and the same goes with that. So clippings from that lawn should not be composted, and they should also specifically not go into the council's green waste collection. And I assume that even though this weed killer comes with warnings about this, that if you can use this in your own garden, how many people are actually aware of this, how serious this can be for at the other end? I mean, it's a whole other conversation about whether we should be spraying our crops for us to eat, or crops for our cattle to eat, that we then eat the meat off. You know, that's a whole different thing. I think these kind of control measures, we are addicted to them. And I don't see how we could possibly feed the earth without using them. You know, the human population is just growing and growing and growing, so this is the future. But we need to be able to find something that doesn't cause this damage. You know, for someone like me who's trying to grow their own vegetables, not organically because I cannot afford to buy certified organic compost, but you know, I try to not add any excessive fertilizers or anything like that. You know, I don't use any slug pellets or other chemicals, you know, and unknowingly it just comes in on a bought bag of compost and it has devastating effects. It's just not fair, and something needs to be done about it. You know, I think part of the problem is that it's nearly undetectable in the compost or the manure, but the very susceptible plants, they react very, very strongly. So let's talk about that, shall we? So what does it actually do? So the Aminopyralid, it deregulates, or it means that it disrupts the plant growth processes. So the plant can't grow normally, basically. It's a hormonal weed killer. It means that it mimics the normal hormones of the plant that it uses in its growth mechanism, and it binds to those receptors and it basically blocks them. So the plant will grow, but it won't. If it's a heavy contamination, it will eventually die. So what kind of causes can you identify in your plants that are affected? So it's a bit of a list, and some of these, all these things are signs of plant stress. So you can identify them, you can see them in your plants, even though they might be caused by stress from other causes, like excessive watering or excessive cold or high winds or whatever. So it's a bit tricky, but the effects listed are thickened, curved, twisted stems and leaves, cupping and crinkling of leaves, stem cracking, narrow leaves with callous tissue, hardened growth on stems, enlarged roots, and proliferated growth. So the proliferated growth, I have some hanging baskets of tomatoes and they are not looking normal. I've never seen them grow like that. So I've got a video of that. I'll show you that. But my other outdoor tomatoes, which are the ones I'm most worried about, they are experiencing thickened, curved, and twisted stems and leaves. There's also the cupping, but a bit of cupping is normal with tomatoes. I mean, they start with leaf cupping in a greenhouse, for example, if the night and day temperature extremes are too high, if it swings too much. So that can be normal, but to me it is very extreme. I've also noticed with a lot of my tomatoes this year, and these are tomatoes that I've grown from seed previous year as well, the same packet, a lot of them, and a lot of them are splitting. The growth stem is splitting, which I've seen once or twice before, but on some of these plants they're splitting at every the whole way up. It's just crazy. So anyway, I thought I will show you what that looks like on my plants anyway. So I'm a bit worried about my hanging basket tomatoes, tumbling toms. I've grown them several years and they have never grown like this. So the proliferated growth, could this be it? I mean, I've never seen this many flowers before and there's not actually that much fruit. But again, this could be due to weather. So if there's cold weather before they set flower, the tomatoes can increase the amount of flowers that they produce. So it's really, really tricky. And this one's the same. There's a few fruit coming. But yeah, I don't know. Am I gonna get fruit from all these flowers? I don't know. This is pretty crazy stuff. But there's a bit of leaf curl. But I mean, a bit of leaf curl is always normal on tomatoes. The growing tips. Oh, what even is a growing tip on this? Everything ends up in a flower. But yeah, I don't know. So what plants should you be looking at in your garden? What are the sensitive ones? So it's the solanums, which are the potatoes, the tomatoes, the chilies, the peppers, and the aubergines. The other ones are the legumes, so that would be broad beans, French beans, dwarf beans, peas. Then there's the beet family. They're a bit less sensitive to it, so the solanums and the legumes are the most sensitive. But then there's the beet family, beetroot, chard, and then there's lettuce, spinach, dahlias, carrots, and apparently also some roses. Less effects are seen on brassicas, though I have seen someone post a comparison, a bioassay study where there is some discoloration of the leaves, but they still produce fine apparently. So how did I get into my garden? Well, I am a no digger, so I make my own compost, of course, but you can never really make enough compost for you to spread across all your beds. It just doesn't add up, the mathematics there. So I have to buy in compost, and I usually just buy in large 120-liter bags from Homebase. They're cheap and cheerful. I know they're not peat free, I know they're not organic, but it's what I can afford, so it's what I do. So I built this new area of my allotment, a whole new no-dig bed. So I needed a lot of compost. The bottom layer, the thick layer, I used topsoil from my garden, and then on top of that I wanted to add compost because it acts as a moisture store for the topsoil that I have is heavy clay, right? So it's not great, and the compost on top just makes it that much better to work with. And I spread 1/2 bag, and I planted sweet peas, and the sweet peas are fine. They would be affected, I believe. And then next to them I've planted my outdoor tomatoes, and that was from another bag. So the contamination I would have wouldn't be large, I would say, because I don't see the extremes of the effects that I've seen reported online. But it's enough to make me suspicious. But I will start by explaining a bit about these tomatoes. So they were planted out in May, I'd say first or second week of May. And I did that because I was running out of space in the greenhouse, like you do, and we had such a warm April, and the beginning of May was so warm. So I said, these are extra tomatoes I have. I'll plant them out. It's no big deal if they perish. And some of them are not even for outdoor growing. So I was like, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, no harm done. And that's still the case. I don't really need these tomatoes. But what happened then was that we had a late frost. Normal, the risk of frost had not passed when I planted them out. And lo and behold, we had, I think, 3 nights of hard frost. I did cover them with fleece, and there was a lot of frost damage. But the growing tips had not died on all of them. Some of them I had to use a shoot, a new shoot to come out. What's it called? Sucker. I had to use a sucker instead because the growing tip had died. However, that should not cause these effects, I think. We also had very high winds, and they were covered with fleece for that as well. But they did experience extreme cold for tomatoes anyway. And I know that this could have been a shock to the system, which could be the reason why they look like they do. We have also not had a great summer so far, so the ones that are growing outside, it's not ideal. However, I did not expect it to be this bad. And I have another tomato growing in a different part of the allotment, and yes, it's not big, but it looks normal, has normal growth, and it's got normal looking fruit. And I would say also that all the tomatoes are not affected equally. They have one sun gold that is close to sweet peas and is looking fairly normal to me, whilst some of the other ones, and there's 3 outdoor tomatoes of a type called Outdoor Girl, and they should be fine growing outdoors, right? Because that's what they're marketed as. But yes, so we can have a look at them now. This is the outdoor tomato patch, and this is where I put 1 bag of compost and a 1/2 bag over there. So these 3 are the outdoor girl, outdoor growing tomatoes. Sorry about the wind. These 2 were out during the frost, this one, that was the one that was here, it just didn't have a growing tip. It just had, I think, 3 leaves that survived, and there didn't appear to be anything coming. So I took that one out and put this one in that had been in the greenhouse instead during the frosty period. So it's quite a good comparison, and it's reassuring to me that what I'm seeing specifically on this one could be due to the frost and the high winds that the outer ones experienced. But I'm still not 100% sure. So this is the growing tip of the most damaged one. The leaves are quite small, the buds are very odd looking, and they are still odd looking down here. And the flowers are, the flowers are a bit odd as well. They're like tiny, very, very small. And there's some slight cupping, right? But that could be normal. Difficult to say. So this is the other one that was outside during the frosty period, and these flowers are looking more normal, bigger buds, but the fruit is still a bit weird, I think. They're obviously not, these are not normal flowers in that they are doubles, some of them. So the fruit will be a bit weirder. And there's some cupping as well. So this one has now split here. And it's forming a double head. And this flower truss as well is a double, you see. But yeah, if you look down here, it grew out from a side shoot, I think. Or maybe it didn't. Well, now I'm not so sure anymore. But there's some odd looking growths on the stem here. And it's quite thick. If you compare it to this one that was in the greenhouse longer, it's more slender. It's split as well. I did mention that I saw a lot more splitting this year. So this is the one that's been in the greenhouse. And the flowers are much more normal looking. And there's some cupping. So this is a type of tomato that has the potato looking leaf, which is normal for this variety. But yeah, so these are much more normal looking as opposed to these ones that are just much rounder and smaller. Yeah, so if I just looked at these 3, I would say, yeah, that's probably the cold weather, right? So on the other side here, there are 3 other tomatoes, and they are all for greenhouse growing normally. The first one is Sun Gold, and it was out during the frost, it was out during the wind, and it's looking fairly normal. There's some leaf curl, but the leaves are still soft, and it's looking very similar to the one in the greenhouse. And the fruit is setting normally, the flowers are normal. And to me, this looks like an absolutely normal Sun Gold. And I'm pretty happy that it seems to be surviving fine outside. This is a yellow brandywine. This is a beefsteak tomato. And this, again, was outside during the frost. And it's got lots and lots of these mega blooms. And I've had to take a truss or 2 off down here because the fruit that were, I don't think it was actually forming any fruit. These ones, they just look like this, and they're not going to form normally. So it's usually a smooth beefsteak. It's not one of them crazy shaped ones. But the growing tip is looking fairly normal to me. And it's still soft. So this is the one that for me looks the oddest, which is another beefsteak called Tomande, and it has this extreme curling over of the leaves and weird leaf growths on the stem of the leaves. In addition, it's setting these monsters. Right, they're all not normal. And they have these ginormous mega blooms where you can tell because they have the wrong number of whatever these are called around the flower, and the flower petals are the wrong number. And then it's got, I mean, this could be normal for a tamande. It kind of does shoot off new branches, new flowering, new leaves and new branches off the flowering truss sometimes. But the stem is really, really thick, and it's got these little growths on it. And yeah, some weird growths on here. And to me, it doesn't look normal. The growing tip, so far so good, but it looks like they are starting to curl back on themselves. And they are really crispy, the leaves, as opposed to the one I have growing in the greenhouse. And for this one, I have one growing in another place outside, and it doesn't look like this. But again, this one was out in the frost and that one wasn't, so it could be due to that. And I'll go film that one now. So this is my other tamande. It is another splitter. It's split fairly low down. If I can focus on that. And it is splitting again, so I have actually, I'm training 4 growing tips, but I think they have split again. Yeah, so there's another split here. But otherwise, it's looking normal. It's really soft, and it's got the normal shaped leaves that I'm used to from this. It's got maybe 1 or 2 crazy blooms, but the majority have formed, you know, nice fruit that's coming up. And the stem, there's no thickening, no crazy thickening of the stem or crazy curling of the leaves. This is the greenhouse, and here I have a sungold, which obviously is much taller than the one growing outside, which is not unexpected, but it looks fairly similar to the one, apart from that it's broken, but I've tried to mend it. And this is a tamande again, which is the one that had the extreme leaf curling over. So these are much more similar to the other one growing outside, I think. And yes, it has some crazy fruit, but majority of it is normal. So the flowers are normal for this one. And these 2 are the yellow brandywine, which is another one of the ones growing outside. And again, the one outside has lots of crazy flowers. And there are some inside here as well, but not as many, and there is normal fruit forming. The other thing I'm worried about is some of my chilies. So I did change the bag when I potted them on halfway through. So I have this sweet banana pepper, which has got this leaf curling going on the new growth, which is suspicious, and it's like the leaves turning over. And then let's see, that's another sweet banana. And yes, there's some here as well, but it's looking healthier somehow. I just don't know. I mean, I think all my chilies are pretty rubbish this year, and I assume that this could be, chilies and peppers, that this could be because of the weather. They like really warm weather. But at least there's a fruit here. I'll show you one more thing, which is my marigolds. So the marigolds in here are looking totally fine. If huge, I thought they were dwarf, but they don't look like dwarf French marigolds. So I have marigolds growing among the outdoor tomatoes too, and they are apparently also sensitive, susceptible plants. And this is the leaf curl I see on them. This I don't know if it's normal. I don't know enough about marigolds. The growing tips are looking fine and normal though. So that could just be, I don't know, weather again, right? So you might be wondering, if I'm this unsure about the ones, my outdoor tomatoes, and this, I've been worried about this since they started growing outside. What makes me think that it could be something else than weather? Well, it really started with my beetroot seedlings, and this is what they look like. So this is multi-zone beetroot, bolt hardy, and yes, this could be down to lack of nutrients in these small things, but I've grown the beetroot like this many times before, and I've never seen this mottling. And when I saw a post recently by another Instagram user, I'll link her account here on the screen. This is what hers looked like in her contaminated compost, and it made me super suspicious, because I also had, these are my herbs, and I had really slow germination, and my fennel over here, which is really patchy germination. Don't know if that could be due to that. So this is what really got me thinking about it, and really looking over my plot and seeing what could this possibly be, what's going on. Another thing is my crown prince squash. So this is one. It's growing this end of the asparagus bed, and it's bigger than I anticipated. Shocking. And it's growing in this end, which is where I put homemade compost. And over here there's another crown prince, grown at the same time, same seed, planted out at the same time, same size, and this is the size of it. And this end I've got the usual bagged compost that I buy. Now it could be lots of reasons, and it's looking all right if small, but there's a ginormous rhubarb here. Could be taking moisture. I mean, I'm watering them at the same time almost every day, so I don't know. Could it just be the nutrients? I mean, I've put manure around both of them, same amount, but it could just be that one's in homemade compost and this one isn't. Or is there a contamination that is slowly affecting the growth of this one? So the take-home message, I guess, is that I'm confused. I don't know whether I have contaminated compost or not. So what am I going to do about that? Well, the only thing that I can do as an amateur gardener is just to do a bioassay. It's not that complicated. You take compost, put it in a pot, and you take it from across different pots of different compost across your plots, and you grow a susceptible plant in it. You have to make sure that you don't cross-contaminate, so wear gloves, single-use gloves preferably, or wash your hands very carefully between handling each soil sample, and be careful when you're watering not to create any splash over. And if you cannot water from below, because unless you're using a separate tray for each one of them. And then you grow, for example, a broad bean or a French bean or even a tomato, and try to find a soil sample that is also safe. So I'm going to use some of my homemade compost as the safe one as a comparison, and then we'll see. And it should take about 2-3 weeks, and then I will know. If they're all growing normally, I have nothing to worry about, and I can put this all to rest, and I can just make sure I wait until June to plant my outdoor tomatoes out. And I'll just have to wait on my chilies, I assume. So this is actually filmed the day after, because my neighbor came past and I told him what I was filming about, and he said that's exactly what's going on with my tomatoes, and he actually has what I think is proper contamination, because he has it the opposite way around. So his greenhouse tomatoes that are grown in grow bags, he's had to throw them out because they are not growing. They're forming these frond-like growing tips, and they're just not developing. So by that, it sounds like it's quite a high contamination as opposed to what I would have. So I've asked him to give me some of his compost, and I'm gonna grow beans in that as well as part of my bioassay, and that will be a positive control, as in this is most likely contaminated. Yeah. So where does this leave you though, if it turns out it is positive, your bioassays testing? Can you eat the harvest? Well, the company says that if it's low enough contamination in the compost that you will get a harvest, it means that it's low enough in the produce and will not be harmful. However, I know that they will not have been able to test this in every situation, you know, so they don't know 100% that that's true. I believe the testing that they've done for use in agriculture. I believe that the toxicology testing they've done, where they find out where the harmful dose lies, and then they've done testing to see what the dose would be for what the harmful dose would be for a child to consume that meat produced by cattle fed on this grass. I believe that, and I believe that that's low and they wouldn't be harmful. But what about feeding my toddler these tomatoes if they're grown in this compost that is contaminated? Can they say for 100% sure? No, they cannot. Every scientist who says that they're 100% sure is not a true scientist, because you just don't know 100%. You can make all the checks that you want, and you have to believe in that the system of checks works. Otherwise, you know, you have to be very careful what you eat. But obviously, when it comes down to my child, I'm gonna worry. And I actually I had a sleepless night thinking about this. Is everything on my plot contaminated? It's not great. So the other question I have about safety is that some plants are not susceptible. For example, brassicas. Does that mean that the brassicas don't take up this weed killer into their, you know, their broccoli head, for example? Does that mean that that's then safe to eat? So I went to Homebase, where I went and bought the compost from, and because I couldn't find any contact details on their website, and they actually said in this shop that all their customer service staff has been furloughed, so there's actually no one there to deal with these things, but they took my details down, which probably means I'm never going to hear from them again, but I did it anyway. I also signed an online petition to get this weed killer banned. Yeah, I mean, it needs to be banned if it cannot be kept out of garden compost. It's as basic as that. If it cannot be kept out from entering the system and coming into our hobby gardens, it has to be banned, because it is having a huge effect on us. Or they need to give us compensation. You know, they can't just say it's not harmful, but it's extremely harmful, and it costs us money. It costs us our time and our efforts. You know, is it worth that? I mean, it's obviously worth it to the company, but is it worth it that for our society? I don't know. I obviously don't think so. And I've also contacted the company. It's called, I'm gonna have to insert it here because I can't remember what the website is called, but the company has a reporting system or email that you can contact, and a phone number if you suspect that you have these issues. Yes, so I do hope that you will never have to deal with this. I have had lots of people commenting on my Instagram posts about my tomatoes that they see the exact same things. However, if it's curling like I see it curling, it could be due to stress, environmental stress from the weather, or from drought, or from too much water, or a lot of things. So don't immediately assume that it's Aminopyralid poisoning. But bear it in mind that if you see really odd growth or very strange things happening where your flowers in one bed are just not developing normally, whilst the ones in your garden are. You know, use your instinct. Don't just blame yourself, and look into it. And yeah, I'll end on that, and I'll say happy growing, and I hope I don't end up having this poison in my allotment.